This week's lesson is about square and cube roots. That may seem a little odd. Those might be new words for you. But square and cube roots talk about the opposite of doing exponents. If you remember correctly, you may have heard me say, and when we read about things, if you had a number taken to the second power, we would call that x squared. If you had a number taken to the third power, you would have that called y cubed. This has to do with talking about area and volume. The area of a square, and I'm not very good at drawing them, but let's try that one more time. That's pretty bad. The area of a square is one side times the other side, the length times the width. Well, with a square, those are both the same length. They're the same measurement. So let's say it's 3 on this side and 3 on this side. Its area would be 3 squared, or its area would be 3 times 3, or 9. Now, cube roots are talking about cubes, which are basically our 3D version of squares, right? It's a three-dimensional square. It's a block. Now, when you talk about the volume of something, a rectangular solid or something that's square or rectangular, it's the length times the width times the height. Well, with a cube, a perfect cube, the length times the width times the height. The length, width, and height are all the same. So it would be 3 times 3 times 3, or we would call that the volume is 3 cubed. And if you multiply that out, you get 27. So when we talk about square and cube roots, we're undoing the squaring or the cubing. What we're doing is we're asking, and we use a very special symbol that we call a radical sign. We say, what is the square root of 9? When we say what is the square root of 9, we're asking ourselves what number times itself equals 9. Well, we just did it up here, so we remember it's 3 times 3. So the square root of 9 is 3. Now we're going to be doing the same thing with cube roots. And the way we see a cube root, the radical sign is written with a little 3 there to say that we're looking for the cube root. And let's say we have, what is the cube root of 27? What we're asking ourselves is what number times itself and times itself again equals 27. Again, we did that right up here, and we knew that it was 3 times 3 times 3 is equal to 27. So the cube root, the number that's being multiplied 3 times to get 27, equals 3. Now, you might say, Mrs. Moore, how am I supposed to know what number that is if I can't remember all of my multiplication tables right off the top of my head? Well, I understand sometimes that's difficult, and sometimes you just want to check yourself to make sure you're doing the right thing. So we're going to be looking at a different kind of calculator that will help you do these problems, and it will also help you do your IXL skills when those get assigned to you later this week. I'm going to put a link up along with this video to this calculator tool. It's on a website called Desmos, and you can see up here at the top, desmos.com/scientific. This is where we're going to go for our calculator to help us do roots. And I'm going to go ahead and do the example problems in your book, and I still want you to try to do the got it problems. And what I'll do is I will upload a video tomorrow showing you the answers for the got it problems and maybe even some of the guided practice, just to make sure we're getting this right. So our first example asks us, what is the square root of 64? Now, they're asking us what number times itself equals 64. And you say, Mrs. Moore, I can't remember my times tables and I'm not sure what that is. So what you need to do is come over to our calculator on Desmos, and here you have the radical sign. You want to click that. And there it is right there. Well, we need to put a number under there, don't we? And we're going to type in 64, and it gives us the answer. So the square root of 64 equals 8. If you want to keep your answers to look back at, you can just click this arrow button and it'll just pop up a brand new clean space for you to enter your next problem. But it'll keep that one up there so you can remember it. Your answers are always going to be on this side. Here's your problem, there's your answer. Now, the next one shows us another thing about square roots. When we say the square root of 64 is 8, that's true, but guess what? There's another number that you could multiply by itself and still get 64. If we were to take -8 times -8, the two negatives would cancel out and it would be positive 64. But when you see a radical sign by itself like that, it usually means they want the positive root. Or they want the positive number times itself that would equal the number under the radical sign. Now, sometimes in math, they want to know the positive and the negative numbers. And when they want to know that, they will put this little sign in front of the square root. And that means they want the positive and negative numbers. The way we read this is the positive or negative square root. And our next problem is like that. And look, they gave us some decimals. But we're not going to let decimals scare us because we can punch decimals into our calculator just as easy as we can punch regular numbers into our calculator. So they're asking for the positive or negative square root of 1.21. So we come over to our calculator, we hit our square root sign. Don't worry about this positive and negative when you punch it in. You're just going to add that to your answer at the end. Now we're going to punch in the number underneath the radical sign, which is 1.21. As you can see, it gives us our answer right there. But when we come over here to write our answer, like you'll do in your book or on your homework, you'll put plus or minus 1.1. So what you're saying with that is the square root of 1.21 is positive or negative 1.1. So that little symbol is the positive or negative. Positive or negative. It's just a different way to show that you know that square roots can be positive or negative because multiplying two negative numbers gives you a positive. Let's look at what to do with a fraction underneath a square root symbol. They give you the square root of 25 over 36. Now, if you remember when we did powers with fractions, the power had to be applied to the top number and to the bottom number. The same thing is true with radical signs and square roots. We're going to have on top the square root of 25 and on the bottom the square root of 36. So if you don't remember, all you have to do is come over here. We'll hit the blue button to get us a fresh, clean line. And we're going to do the top number first. Our radical sign, then we punch in 25, and we get 5. So we know when we come over here that the top number for our answer is going to be 5. Then we come back here and we punch in our radical sign and type in the bottom number, which was 36. And that is 6. So our answer is 5 over 6. Now, the very last problem shows us another rule about square roots. They give us the square root of negative 16. Well, there's a little bit of a problem with that. We can try to punch into the calculator. You're going to punch in your radical sign, then you're going to hit the negative sign, and then type in 16. On this side, it says undefined. Here's the problem, guys. you can't multiply the same number by itself and get a negative number, because we could multiply -4 times -4, but that would give us positive 16. We could multiply +4 by +4, and that would give us positive 16. We can't say that we could multiply -4 by +4 and get -16, because these aren't the same number. -4 and +4 are two very different things. If you have positive $4, you're okay. If you have -4, you owe somebody money. They mean two very different things. So we can't say that -16 has a square root. It doesn't. It's what's called undefined. The other way you can write this is no solution. There's no answer to this. You can write no solution, you can write undefined like it says on the calculator, or you can make this little symbol here, which means there's no answer. So those are the first set of example problems. And now I want to go down to example 5 on page 72. Let's clear this off and see what it does. What they're doing in these set of problems is they are giving you a little bit of an equation. And they say t squared equals 169. Well, when we talked about earlier, we talked about the fact that squaring something is kind of the opposite of finding the square root. Squaring something, this says t times t equals 169. So we need to figure out what t is. The way to do that, we're asking ourselves, what number times itself is 169? Well, we have a symbol and an operation for that. We can take the square root of 169, because that is saying what number times itself equals 169, right? So we are going to punch that into our calculator. We come over, we do our square root symbol, we type in 169, and we find out that the answer is 13. The square root of 169 equals 13. So when you get any kind of equation where it says a number squared equals another number, you're going to take the square root of that number to find out what the variable is. Now, as we move on to the next page, we start talking about what are called cube roots. Cube roots, again, are similar to square roots, but we're asking what number times itself 3 times equals that number. So I think the example I gave you earlier was 3 times 3 times 3 equals 27. So 3 cubed equals 27. The cube root, with a little 3 up there, of 27 equals 3. So now we're going to be finding cube roots, and that's a little bit different on the calculator. So the first example they give you and ask you to find the cube root is the cubed root of 125. Now the way you do that on this calculator, you see this little radical with the n? That means you can find whatever number root you want. So we are going to click that. And first it gives us the little cursor up here above the radical sign. That's where we're going to put in our 3. So come down here and punch 3, and then click on the gray box so you can enter your number that's underneath the cube root sign. Our number is 125. And we hit enter, and that is 5. So we find out using our calculator that the cube root of 125 is 5. And we can check that. 5 times 5 times 5. Well, 5 times 5 is 25. Times 5 again gives us 125. Okay? Now, here's another really interesting thing about cube roots. We cannot have a negative square root, but with cube roots, we're multiplying 3 times. What if I did -5 times -5 times -5? If I was multiplying a negative number 3 times, well, negative 5 times negative 5 gives me positive 25, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. But then we're multiplying it again times a negative. And a positive times a negative is a negative. So even though you cannot have a negative underneath the square root, you can have a negative underneath a cube root, and that is perfectly fine. So let's look at the second, number 7 example. It says the cube root of negative 27. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our calculator. We're going to put in our radical sign with a little n over it. We're going to fill in the number with 3 because we want a cube root. We're going to click on the gray box again. We'll type in our negative sign and then type 27. And it tells us right there that the cube root equals negative 3. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to go through and try the Got It problems. Use this calculator. There'll be a link next to the video for this calculator on Desmos. Go ahead and use it. If you're having trouble, watch the video again to see which buttons you need to push to get the right answers. And do those Got It problems. And I will have a video up tomorrow showing you the answers to the Got It problems and a couple more from the Check Your Understanding, the guided practice. So I'll do a few of those for you. That way, hopefully you'll be able to do your independent practice on your own without any trouble.